Everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Marie Swift of Impact Communications, and I'll be your host today. Today, our topic is clear, compelling visual, the future of client engagement. So we have some great panelists here with us today. You can see them on screen. I'll start with a couple of quick introductions. First of all, we have John O'Connell. He is the founder of the Oasis Group, a leading consultancy for the wealth management industry, offering award-winning consulting services, industry-leading research, and compelling on-demand training. We also have Janet Galloway. Janet is the owner of B&B Strategic Management, a wealth management firm that supports clients in wealth building, family protection, and addressing complex financial questions. We also have Ted Toso, and he is the founder and CEO of Vi4 Wealth, which develops visual intelligence tools that transform complicated financial data into easily digestible, engaging visual reports for financial professionals and their clients. And last but not least, we have Joel Bruckenstein. He is a globally recognized fintech authority and producer of the T3 Technology Tools for Today conference and new this year, AI University, and that will be March 9th through 12th, 2026 in New Orleans. So thank you all for joining me today. We'll get started with the questions that I have prepared, but just a note to the audience, I know you all will have questions. I hope you have questions. Please put them into the chat on the GoToWebinar panel. You can put them into the question area or into the chat area. We will see them. I'm assisted today by Colin, and he will take your questions and read them at the end. But without further ado, I want to jump right in and start with you, Joel. So putting you in the hot seat. Many advisory practices today serve a broad range of clients, some in their distribution years, others just starting their wealth journey, and everything in between. So most performance reports seem designed for MBA level analysis. So I want to talk about simplification first and why that matters when you're serving such a diverse audience.
I'm not sure I really have an opinion on that. No, I'm just kidding. Look, I think it's very true that the average advisory firm today wants to attract a diverse audience, right? We all talk about organic growth. We're trying to reach out to the next generation. And, so first of all, if you think about the next generation, they process information a little bit differently than the pre and post-retirement clients that we're used to dealing with, and they're very visual. So I think making it simple, making it visual really strikes a chord with that audience based on what we've seen in our research. But I think furthermore, just in general, advisors have a tendency to want to prove to their clients how smart they are, and they go into much more detail than clients really want. And that can be counterproductive. That being said, I think there's a certain segment of the client population that really does want the details, right? If you're dealing with fiduciaries who are trustees, for example, or something of that nature, or just some clients who are a lot better educated in the ins and outs of finance, they're going to want that detail. So while it's really, really important to start at a high, simple level, the advisor also needs the ability to drill down when asked for those types of questions.
So Ted, I know you have an opinion on this. John, I want to hear from you too. So John, let's have you go first and then Ted.
Yeah, I completely agree with the direction Joel's going, right? When you take a look, most clients come in and they just simply want to understand, how am I doing and where am I going to wind up ending up? You'll always have the person like myself who's a computer scientist that says, show me the detail. Let me get in on those spreadsheets and take a look at them. But I think I'm a little bit few and far in between. Most clients really do want to have a more visual representation to understand where's their portfolio today, how did they do over the period that you want to talk to them about. Most firms will meet with clients once or twice a year. So the client wants to know kind of where's I before, where am I now, so how did I do, where should I be going moving forward, and that's about it. So a lot of the performance reports that you see today are far too detailed for what the client really wants to talk about. And you find that, by the way, especially with Joel and my experience in working with a lot of advisory firms, most of them don't actually get through the performance report. It's like the last thing they talk about in their annual client meeting. So there's a better way to have a conversation with the client and ease some of their fears at the beginning of a meeting, and then really kind of dive into what their goals are and what they're concerned about. And I think a visual representation of the data is a definite way to go.
Yeah, and I would just add one thing to that, John. You know, it's also about goals, right? I mean, typical performance reports just talk about the performance of the portfolio. It doesn't really tell a client how they're doing, because unless you tie goals back into the conversation, there's no frame of reference. So just to say, hey, we beat the S&P by 100 basis points doesn't tell the client how they're doing.
Right. And the clients vary, Joel, to that extent. When you talk about the client, the questions the client is asking is different in so many cases that there's similarities, but some clients may be more concerned about a goal. Some clients may be concerned about an index. Some clients may be concerned about past performance or what their distribution is for the up and coming year. And so as that story changes for advisors, I think it's important to look at how that message is conveyed. And as I hear this, having spent 29 years in the trenches as a portfolio manager and advisor, we had a problem with, we called it the glossy eye syndrome, where clients would just gloss out, right? And so to your point, Joel, some clients want those details, right? But a bulk of them would just gloss out, say, I trust you, right? And it's like, great. And then we called it Groundhog Day, the next quarter or the next year. It's like we seem to be repeating ourselves. And I sit here today before you because my path down learning about visualization occurred when my mother said, just draw a picture with you or it's worth 1,000 words. So I started researching, like we researched modern portfolio theory when I was an investment advisor. We could talk about Markowitz and all that jazz. But when we started going down visualization, we found some pillars. 3M in 1986 did a collaboration with the University of Minnesota. And the gist of an extensive study was that 43% more success when a visual aid is used in a presentation. And I'm old enough to know when we got graphs in our reporting, in our client reporting. And it was a game changer when you could put a graph in front of a client. And so bringing the visual and changing the client gets into the science of it, because what they found in 1986 was this, is not only do you have a 43% greater chance of success, but it comes down to 3 attributes: attention, communication, and retention. And so, Joel, when you talk about those clients that really want the details and those senior clients that often have the largest accounts, the thing is, visualization works towards retention. And if that client retains your message, you're going to have a much higher probability. Janet can speak to how it actually works in the field, but that's some of the science behind it, and that goes back 40 years. And so looking at where we've built on that, I think it's really quite fascinating, what the science says about visuals in presentations.
And I kind of feel like we're beating up on the traditional reports. I come from that world where I was trained and I designed my client report to have everything on one page to support the story I'm telling, so I can tell them how they're doing in relationship to their goals. And I thought I had it pretty dialed in until I started doing the next generation of that visualization. And what I've been really surprised to find is it doesn't only appeal to the younger generation. When I put this new visualization in front of my boomers, my 70s and 80s, they're like, whoa, wow, on my phone, I know exactly how much I made. Now we can get into the deeper conversations about all of the other things, the goals, the family, which deepens that relationship between me and my client.
So I'm thinking about when my husband and I go to a meeting together, we're very different. I want the visual and he wants the detail. So would you address that, Janet, when you're talking to couples?
That's where this comes in really, really well. So thank you for the question. So what y'all were talking about, the varieties of clients that we serve and those who want the details. What comes to mind is a couple of clients. I have a client who is an engineer and he wants to know all the details. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. I've got all the numbers and I'm talking all the nerd stuff. And he's like, well, that doesn't really make sense. Why would that work? And so I'm like jiving, we're getting into it. And finally, his wife, who's his high school sweetheart, looks at him and goes, honey, you don't have to understand how all the things work. That's why we have her. So I love having the high level so I can engage the non-financial spouse, and being able to go into the details, which both are important because of the variety of people we serve. Now, another story, another client, husband and wife came in. I'd been serving them for years, and I created my spreadsheets and I was like, hey, y'all are spending too much. You know, as delicately as we can say that as financial advisors, but you've said that this is your goal and taking a lot of money out, and not detailed spreadsheets. Okay, this is how much we made this year. This is how much you took out. To be fair, the portfolio was doing well. We were beating the market. So I was happy. I was doing my job. Well, here's the thing. We're sitting in the meeting, and the wife, who really wasn't engaged in the conversations, the detailed spreadsheets and the financial stuff, she finally looks at me and goes, Janet, I'm not sure why we've hired you, because we're really not up that much in my portfolio. I'm like, but you see how much you've taken out, my spreadsheet. So I turned to this new visualization report where it's animated, and sent her that report that showed the $6 million they had spent out of this portfolio. Now, several times I'd emailed her, crickets back. Several times I'd call her, wouldn't get any back. I sent her this visualization, the animated visual, showing her the $6 million going out of the portfolio. Guess what? I got an email back. Finally, she's like, oh, I didn't realize that we had spent that much. Okay, so I was not communicating in a way that she was understanding. Now she's engaged in the conversation. And the really sad part of this whole story is this. About 6 months later, her husband passed away. Her husband was the one really engaged in the process, the investments, the planning. She wasn't that engaged until I sent her the animated video, and then that brought her in. Because of that and that change in the relationship, when her husband ultimately, unfortunately, did pass away, she stayed with me because she trusted me and I was meeting her where she was at.
I think about time, and time is one of the most valuable assets that any of us as business owners have. And so who wants to jump in on that? How does this approach help with time management for a busy advisor?
I can answer that, how am I doing, in 5 minutes. I can send them that animated video rather than getting on the call with them, generating a report, a flat report, and then scheduling a meeting, doing my prep. I can, 5 minutes, send a video. This is where you're at. If you have more questions, give me a call. And I've met them where they're at. I've answered their questions. 9 times out of 10, that's all that's needed. So rather than an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours between the meeting and the prep and the follow-up, I've just saved that time in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think it goes well beyond just visualization. I think as an industry, we're changing as the needs of our clients change and as technology more broadly changes. You know, I was just at a conference this past week, and one of the big takeaways is for all those folks who are doing quarterly meetings with your clients, like, why are you doing them? Like, in many cases, your clients don't want to do quarterly meetings. So to Janet's point, like, meet them where they're at and be ready to respond when they need you. So a little more on demand and a little less structure is what most people in today's workplace certainly want. You know, you're always going to have the retired people, the little old lady who wants to come in every quarter because it gives her a chance to dress up and go out to lunch maybe and actually socialize. But for busy clients, you know, once a year, tops twice a year is enough, and everything else should be on demand. But again, if it's as easy as when they have a question, sending them a video or sending them some representation that answers their question really fast, they appreciate it as well because they're busy as well.
Absolutely. So I think when you talk about busy as well, you look at 20 years ago, the attention span, if you ask Google, was 12 seconds. Today it's 8 seconds. And they attribute that to increased digital distractions, multitasking, and that it affects the focus and productivity. So the gorilla in the room, Joel, is when they tell us that they don't want to do a quarterly meeting, it tells us that they're distracted, right? They're doing other stuff. They want to do other stuff. Whatever that stuff is, that's what they want to be doing, not in this meeting. And it gets back to, again, when we're communicating something, if we don't have their attention, we're not communicating. If we can't capture attention, and that's why a visual aid of any kind, really any, even if it's a video of yourself to make something personal and engaging to capture somebody's attention. Clients today are more technologically advanced than most advisors. And when you look at the YouTube, you look at the stimulation they have from their kids, from their grandkids. I have former clients that are in their mid 80s that use FaceTime regularly and be to talk with their grandchildren. So I think it's, you know, from my standpoint, it's about meeting people, as you said, Joel, where they are at and understanding that's where they're at and doing something that's effective to both parties, you know, whether it's the preparation you put into it or the message you're sending. If you can capture the attention, you have an opportunity to communicate, and then maybe retention. And if you have those three, you're likely to begin an action. And whether that's going to be more money or referrals.
That was
Janet's
my point.
they're paying you for advice, right? And
Yeah.
so, but they want the advice on demand on their terms. And so, yes, it does save you time, because if they're happy with what they're, you still need to have these touches from time to time. But I think the most important thing that goes to client satisfaction is when they have a question and it's something that is on their mind and now they're focused on that you respond quickly and appropriately. And if visualization helps you do that, that's just another win for the advisor.
Well,
I
and
also
Joel,
think
I'm gonna kind of ping pong off of yours, because in our practice, we like to be proactive. We don't
Right.
like to wait till the clients reach out to us for those answers. So I'm sending that email with the visualization report every 6 months and just saying, hey, we're on top of it. So that if they have questions, then, oh, well, by the way, what are the questions? We're calling them on a regular basis, asking, how's your family doing? What are you doing for fun? Who are you doing it with? So having those, again, the deeper conversations, and this is just one tool we can use proactively, not just answering the question, but hey, just so you know, we're watching this, especially as the market does what the market does. That gives my clients a level of comfort knowing that Janet's on it. So it's not even necessarily answering their questions, it's also being proactive in that communication, because that's what
I think,
believe advisors.
again, the twice a year or however often you're sending them that report, that's kind of expected. And the good news is, if you're doing that, A, you can respond when they do have a question, and B, when you have those other conversations, those other touches, they can be about things like, how are you doing? How's your family? You know, tell me about your vacation. You're building up more of a personal relationship. So getting in front of the work part of the conversation and having more time to have the personal part, that just forms a more lasting bond.
it's also hyper personalized, right? You're not
Yeah.
just sending, for example, here's your market update, or here's, you know, you mentioned, Janet, the vulgarities of the market. How many advisors do we know produce like a weekly or a monthly market update? And it's usually a text-based email and it's quite dense. You know, in this instance, you're able to reach out to your clients with a personalized message about their portfolio twice a year, which really does kind of strengthen that relationship and gives them the opportunity to reach out and say, you know what, I really meant to call Janet. I've got a question on this. Or, you know, we are looking at taking a really large vacation next year. Maybe we should start planning for that and putting some money aside for it. So I think that those additional touch points are incredibly valuable to start a conversation. And as Joel points out, then when you're giving them a ring, you're not giving them a ring to just talk about their portfolio. You're giving them a ring to really strengthen that personal relationship you've got with your client.
Exactly
So-
right, John. Joel, oh, go ahead, Marie.
Go ahead, Ted, and then I'll jump
I was just going to add that Janet uses videos prolifically in her practice. And I think that active engagement and that movement from a visual standpoint drives to retention. And I think what you're talking about are those follow-up questions, because when we add movement to those visuals, you're talking retention, they say is up to 28 days. Look at the follow-up window that Janet has to follow up with those clients because she's using that type of communication. And I think that's where you see it.
Absolutely.
Well, and Marie, you, again, back to the time situation, we are very technology forward in my practice. And every time we added a new technology, it was like, okay, what do we need to learn, right? It took time to learn how to integrate this. I was pleasantly surprised at the short learning curve it took to learn the animated visual. It's not like it takes a couple of hours. It takes like 10 minutes to figure it out. It's click, 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 you're there. So it saves time not only in the learning and integrating, but also in that engagement with the client.
I'm really intrigued by this because as a person who has a wealth management firm, I get quarterly reports in paper format. And what I want to know is how are we doing tracking against our financial plan? And I end up sitting down for 40, 50 minutes with a calculator going through the Roth IRA, the SEP IRA, the brokerage account, the da-da-da-da-da. And then I look and I still don't know how we're doing. I mean, I'm just not that smart. Isn't that what I'm paying somebody else to tell me?
It's not that you're not that smart. That's not it. We make these more complicated than they need to be sometimes. And the bottom line up front, you know, that military bluff bottom line up front, sometimes that's what your clients need. And going back to what we were talking about, is meeting the clients where they're at. If they want the more details, whew, I'm in nerd heaven talking about the details. If they just want to know high level bottom line up front, am I doing well and am I in line with what we've talked about with my financial plan? I can create a 5-minute video. It takes me 10 minutes. Okay, let's look at the things, create a video, and it would save you time on your end as well. So yeah, thank you for
I was going to
sharing.
say something a little more direct. Maybe you need a new advisor, but your advisor might be listening and might be pissed off at me.
Call me.
I love you, Joel.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the paper financial plans in a binder, ka-thunk, when they come down on the table, right? Don't
Yeah.
people want a more digital interactive experience? Seems archaic to be using paper.
You really bring up an interesting point too, right? It's the client's time being spent around this.
Right.
So you send the client the report, like you're going through this for 45 minutes to an hour yourself to try to figure out how you're doing, right? If the client goes in to do a meeting with their advisor, the advisor's not the only one spending an hour prepping for that meeting to have the conversation. And the advisor's not the only one doing action items for 30 to 40 minutes after the meeting to figure out what to do next, right? The client walks out of the meeting, probably with their spouse or their significant other, trying to digest what they just heard in the meeting. And it just seems like a woeful waste of time to kind of do that over and over and over again. And, you know, I think Janet or Ted, you mentioned Groundhog Day. You know, you're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, which last I checked, that's kind of the definition of insanity, right? To do it over and over again and expect a different result. There's just a better way in being able to communicate with your client visually and respecting your time and your client's time.
Look, I think we all agree that if you walk into your advisor's office and say, how am I doing? They shouldn't hand you a bunch of reports and say, you're doing fine here, read this, right? I mean, that's not the way it should be. We live in the 21st century. We have better tools. Visualization is certainly a big part of that, but it's also, again, meeting clients where they are and how they want to be communicated with. There are some clients, and again, it's a small subsector, that want those reports and want to go home and read it for an hour, and they actually enjoy that stuff. But the vast majority of advisory clients are paying the advisor to be able to tell them in plain English so they can understand it and not have to go back and read an encyclopedia when they go home.
Right.
And I thought that my one-page report was designed with all that information on one page. I thought I was doing that service until I saw Ted's research on what they're looking at and what they're retaining. Ted, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, happy to, Janet. It's a great question because from the 86 report, that takes us to a study from 2006 that 3 professors in England, the University of Lancaster and the University of Worcester in England did on the difference between static and moving as it relates to memory. How is memory affected? So Joel, this is right to your point. You might enjoy reading the spreadsheets, but as you age and memory is a challenge, we've tested this with mid 80-year-olds that have said, you know, I know, and then they've been in markets for 50 years and said, I have all my managers, I have all my reports. But the funny thing is, I look at this visual report far less because I remember those numbers. I got to keep looking at my spreadsheets to refresh myself as to what those numbers are. And this gets to retention. And so memory, as it relates to move in visuals. So we have static visuals, we have multi-static visuals, which are decks or PDFs with a bunch of images. And then in 2006, they did a study that said if you add movement to these visuals, your memory goes from 7 days to 28 days. 28 days that you have to follow up and talk about that message. And so, John, what you said about Groundhog Day, this is a chance to chip away at Groundhog Day. And by meeting the client where they are, in the fact that when we engage their memory, and then it goes to the next level, because in 2006, now mind you, this is 20 years ago, right? They said in their summation of this paper, eye tracking will be required to quantify and take this to the next level. That technology didn't exist then. They were just beginning it. And take this to 2024. We did a test with a leading eye tracking company for the first time with financial services data. It's just shocking to me because financial services is over 100 million presentations a year to their clients. And when we talk about persuasion, it's not for, it's for the best of intentions, but the goal is to capture attention, communicate the message, retain it. And if all 3 of those legs are met, you're going to get an opportunity for the action. When we used eye tracking, we saw a 56% on visuals. When we added movement, go to 78% attention span, and memory increased to 300%. When you added movement to the visuals, and that gets into more detail of standard mean fixation duration, the standard deviation of those mean fixation durations, and there's real science behind this, okay? But to bring this to our audience, this is what prevents Groundhog Day. And so if you find yourself quarter by quarter, year after year, seeming to say the same thing, changing up that message in the form of visuals may likely create retention where now you can start to move forward and move forward and change that message and dig into what those more meaningful conversations are that you guys are talking about.
Well, and to piggyback off of that research, that's why I finally put it in front of my clients for the first time, is to see, all right, let's see, do they see it? Do they understand it? Do they retain it? And what surprised me was it brought in more money.
Well, that's perfect because we do have a question from the audience. So Colin, I'm going to take this one and then you can gather up the rest of them. But yeah, this has been on my mind too. So this type of service, this methodology, it seems like, Janet, you can really set yourself apart from your competition. So it's almost like a marketing tool, right? So it's a great value prop. Would you address that first?
So it is, because your clients have people they know that you don't know. So a couple of examples. I had one client who we had talked about the volatility in the market and how she didn't want to lose a dime because that was very important to her. It was her hard-earned money. And she was okay taking some risks because she wanted to capture that upside. We'd been having this conversation for years. I put this tool in front of her and I could see as she visually, it was a visceral reaction to that volatility in the market. Now, look, her portfolio was up. She'd done well, and she was still having a negative visceral reaction to that volatility. Well, there was an account, $250,000 account that was outside. Now we've brought that in and addressed that volatility. So it's not a matter of just, do you understand how much you made? I now understood not only that the volatility, I mean, because we all are in the markets, we get the market is volatile, but now I really saw, okay, this really bothers her. What can we do? Oh, and by the way, there's $250,000 over there. Now we can bring it. So it was a win-win. It was good for her. And that conversation, we got there quicker because I could see her visceral reaction.
All right, so Colin, I think you may have a few more questions. Do you want to read us the first one?
Yeah, so I think this one will kind of piggyback nicely off the one you just asked, Marie. So the question here, has this methodology brought in more money? I think that's a question towards you, Janet.
I've got another story. So I've got another client. So great question, because it was a surprise to me that this was some of the results of using the animated visual. I have a client who's just a very dear friend. And so I sent him a video right before we had our annual visit, and he hadn't opened the video. I was like, hey, did you check your email? No, why? Did you send me something? Well, yeah, because I had sent him this report. So the beautiful part about that was I'm like, all right, cool, open it. Let me watch. So he opened it. He watched it right in front of me, and he goes, wow, my portfolio has done well. I need to give you some more money. And he rolled over another account, which for years he'd been going, no, Janet, no, I've got this little 401k. I'm just going to leave it there. No, it's not for you, Janet. As soon as he opened that report, he's like, yeah, he rolled that account over as well. So it's a surprising result. So not only are they understanding it quicker, they're getting to the bottom line up front quicker. And yeah, I've brought in more money.
Excellent. I just had two more questions pop in, both under the same subject here. Are there any compliance issues with using a visualization tool like this?
Ted, I'm gonna let you talk to that, because doesn't it connect directly to the details?
Yes, and that's a very good question. Yes, there are compliance issues. There absolutely are. When presenting to a client financial services, that has to be reviewed. The fortunate thing with the way the visualization that we're associated with is a direct pass-through from already compliance approved data. And so if a visual tool like a graph is connected with your aggregator, chances say your compliance officer's already approved that aggregator's data. You have the proper disclosure with that aggregator's data. And the idea is to make that data consumable. And so as long as the integrity of the aggregator's data is maintained, it's a benefit from a compliance standpoint because it's an electronic file that's recorded. If it's something you record as a video and send it to your client, you have an MP4 video with your audio overlay that's stored in a cloud somewhere or a vault somewhere and saved forever.
Yeah, I would frame it a little
So-
bit differently, but the same thing. It's like, hey, if you're handing out to your clients performance reports, that data is coming from somewhere.
Right.
This is the same data. It's just being represented in a slightly different way. So as long as you know the data integrity is good, number one, and to Ted's point, number two, as long as you're retaining it, which you're required to do, just as you would, anything that's written, then you should be fine. Having said that, we should put a disclosure. We're not compliance attorneys, but I feel pretty confident that any compliance attorney would tell you exactly what we're telling you.
Like you're in the industry, Joel.
Yep.
All right, more questions kind of just keep coming in here. So is the report going to be too simplistic when the client gets past the initial understanding of the visualization? Most clients will probably want more data.
I'm going to wait on that first. I actually disagree. I don't think clients are going to want more data. And if they do, then you can provide them with the additional data because you have a chain of custody, if you will, all the way back to the original performance through to the visualization. I think that Janet, I'll let you weigh in after this, but I think that the visualization actually removes a lot of confusion that you have when you're discussing these numbers with the client. And I would venture to say many clients, after they get a feel for, oh, I'm doing all right, they're going to want to move on to the reason they wanted to meet with you in the first place, right? So if this is not your scheduling the annual meeting, your client wants to talk to you about something. Even if you schedule the annual meeting, as I discussed a moment ago, your client is prepping for that annual meeting just as much as you are. So they're coming in with a set of questions that they're going to want to ask you. And they're going to want to get to those questions pretty much as quickly as possible because that's the reason they wanted to talk to you. So I think being able to show the visualization up front and being able to show the client how they've done based on that visualization really leads you quicker to the meat of the conversation, which is why they wanted to talk to you in the first place.
Yeah, and I would add that, again, really, if you're a wealth manager, it's not just about investments. It's about helping clients meet their life goals. And that's what they care about. So the quicker you can take the focus off of the investments and move it on to what's meaningful, the deeper your relationship's going to be and the better your retention is going to be. So yes, there are going to be clients that have questions. And to John's point, the data is there to back it up. But I think after they get used to the way it's being presented in a different way to them that may be unfamiliar initially, and they become comfortable with the numbers and that what you're showing them is true and can be backed up by data, they're not going to want to dig into the data very often.
And I'm going to add, if you have a couple, generally one part of the couple is very engaged in those details and the other part of the couple is not. Traditionally, yes, it's been the woman. I mean, I remember sitting when I was working at one of the larger broker dealers, seeing this just beautiful older couple come in and sit there and the husband engaged with the male financial advisor. And then I remember the female asking very specific questions about very specific stocks. And now the male advisor answered her questions, yes. She was asking the wrong questions to get the answers she was looking for. And I remember leaving that meeting and going, there's got to be a better way for us to communicate what they're really asking for. And for that little old lady to, I mean, I'm going to be old someday. Please don't take offense to that. And I hope to be old someday. Well, I'm old now. But anyway, please don't take offense to that verbiage. It was sad to me to watch her try to engage the advisor and not understand the answer that she was getting. Even though the answer was a good answer and it was technically correct, it wasn't in verbiage or framed a way that made sense to her and didn't answer the question that she was asking. That gap between that really detailed financial spouse who wants to dig into the details and that person just wants to know, okay, how are we doing? And are we on track? It really bridges that gap and engages both. I mean, we know that retention of women, quite frankly, as a client, when something happens to their spouse, either due to death or divorce, what are those retention numbers? I mean,
Really
very low. Very low.
very low.
So if we can do more to engage them and build that trust while their spouse is with us, and look, I know I say traditionally women, I'm not picking on women. I know that we have a variety of scope these days. Just traditionally, that's what I've seen. Yes, things may change in the future. If we can bridge that gap and engage both parts of the couple, how much better is that for your business? How much better is that for your psyche? Because now you know you are serving those clients to the best of your ability and they understand what you're saying to them. How cool is that? We have a great business. We get to
I
help
have
people.
to say too, like most clients are not coming in fully educated on modern portfolio theory, market pennant, the vulgarities of the market and all the variables that can change those conditions. That is what they're hiring you for as an advisor, right? So their questions, by and large, do tend to be more along the lines of, Hey, I want to retire with dignity. How does that look? Hey, I'd like to leave some money to my children. What does that look like? Hey, I'd like to be able to do something with, with the university I went through, the high school I went through. How do I do that? They're more concerned with the intentionality of their money and not as concerned with the individual performance that they've received. And I'll make one other point there. I think there are a lot of stereotypes where with one spouse or the other spouse understanding more about it. I would argue if the advisor is really using diagnostic interviewing skills, what he's going to learn is both spouses do not necessarily understand what you're telling them when you're getting into details of their portfolio.
Yeah, and
They're
another
just
thing,
afraid to say they don't understand it.
That's true.
Okay, so being able to have a conversation with them that grounds them in a visualization where that conversation can naturally evolve in different directions, I think you're doing your client a better service than putting them in a position where the only option is to say, I don't understand. No one really likes saying that. So I think you're putting your client in a very difficult position if they're nodding their head and you think they understand everything you're saying to them, because I'm not quite sure that's the case.
yeah, and I mean, another interesting statistic is like, why do clients leave their advisors, right? Performance is not in the top 3. I don't think it's in the top 5, actually, right? It goes to trust. And where do you get trust? From being able to communicate things in a way your clients understand them. So, if you want to build trust with clients, it's imperative on the advisor to make sure that you're communicating properly to the client. And whatever means works for you, whether it's visualization or something else, that's like the #1 goal. So figure out what works for you and make sure when you're talking to a client, that they don't just nod their head and say, do you understand this, or would you like me to explain it further, or do you have any questions about what I just said? Because that's how you build trust.
Right. Joel, to that extent, and John, what you were touching on with neither of them get it, and they don't have a way to say that. And Joel, what you're talking about in building trust in that communication. In 2024, at an investment conference with investment advisors, we did a test. We did an eye tracking test live. We put an investment statement in front of 15 investment professionals, not the client, but the investment professional, okay? Janet's peers. And we asked them one question. You get 10 seconds. How much money did you make? And then we showed them a visual of this exact same data. It was just a visualization versus a spreadsheet with all this stuff. And it was on a mobile device. So we did up the ante because they're investment professionals. So we held them to a little higher standard. We didn't give them a full computer screen PDF. One investment professional asked for a calculator. 14 of 15 couldn't answer in 10 seconds on a standardized statement with, this is what I started with, this is the change, and then you get the 4 or 5 columns of net gains, what have you, as it relates to the different asset class types. When we did the visualization, where we simplified it based on the exact same data, same aggregator, same provider of information, 14 of 15 got the net gains correct to the dollar amount. And it was a $100,000 dollar amount. And so when we tested that live with those people, and I don't know of too many people that have actually tested what people understand and don't understand in the reports that they're given. We talk about KYC in the industry. It's one of the things that keeps us going, which we're excited about, is learning about that. And that was a pivotal moment for us in 24 when we got the results back from that test, seeing the staggering difference on attention, communication, and retention based off of a standard, we'll call it a spreadsheet report. And I don't mean to beat up on them. They've been they've done very, very good for a very long time. And we wouldn't be having this conversation if that wasn't there. But taking that information and making it active in images increases the retention on that 93%. At least that's what we saw in a live audience.
And I think the key that I keep trying to go back to is it was the animation in the visualization. It wasn't just the visualization, it was the animation. Because, I mean, how many times do you sit down and scroll on social media and all of a sudden 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour has gone by? That gets to that animation. This is what people are used to now.
Right, and what, Janet, to just off that, and John, when you were touching on the couple, right? And Janet, you told the story about the wealth transfer between the husband and the wife. And Marie, you were acknowledging how little that often happens when that happens, right? And then then there's the real gorilla in the room, the next generation. And what happens when the kids get it? The largest wealth transfer in the history of our world is occurring over the next 20 years. And, obviously we're into visualizations, but we think those visuals are positioning to really help with that transfer so that that message can become future-proof for the advisor. They don't have to change the core of their practice, just tweak the way they deliver the message to the consumer.
Excellent. Another question that I've seen a couple of times come up here in our question box here. Is there anywhere where I could see an example of this visualization?
Yes.
That's for you, Ted.
Vi4wealth.com. V is in visual, I is in intelligence, the number 4, wealth.com. There's some examples there. There's some white papers there that I've been citing. You can find there. There's a blog there we did with Integrated Advisors Network on some of that initial eye tracking testing. There's a lot of science behind the visuals that drive and support the reason these outcomes happen. It's not random.
Excellent. Another question here. I'm new to this idea of starting simple and drilling down. What's the best way to get started?
Anna?
Well, I mean, there's been a trend in the industry for several years now with that one-page financial plan. I know Marie just mentioned the old school printing out that binder of a financial plan, and then your clients walk out of your office and what happens? The kids need braces and that wasn't in the plan, so it's useless. So starting that simplification, start thinking about how you can communicate and meet your clients where they're at. If you want to integrate the visual, definitely take a look at vi4wealth.com. It's simple on purpose. Let me just say that. It is simple on purpose because the intention behind it is to get the information, bottom line, up front, meeting your clients where you're at or where they're at and communicating. And then look, they hire us for our depth of knowledge. We can go deeper in meeting the different clients where they're at. The automated or the animated visual report is a great way to start just in your annual meetings, or start with that engagement, that on-purpose engagement where your clients know you're on top of it. Doesn't take long to learn because I'm telling you, I know, I understand. When we start talking about technology and the learning curve for technology, I promise this learning curve is very, very short. Ted makes it easy.
Look, I would just say start with your own tech stack, right? I mean, you probably have a lot of tools in there that can help you simplify your deliverables to clients right now. Most of the financial planning software allows you to create custom reports and save them, so you can make a report that's as short or as long as you want it to be. And we're advocating, honestly, what we do for most clients is we put them into groups and we say, we know there's the 10% of engineers and actuaries, and we're going to give them a full report. And we're going to say the majority of folks want a much simpler and to the point report, and we're going to have a separate package for them. Same thing with financial planning, right? I mean, the reports can be, with all good financial planning software, as extensive or not extensive as you want them to be, from a couple of pages to 50 plus pages. Again, we advocate less is more most of the time, unless you have a certain type of client that you know is going to be asking you, where did every single number come from? A lot of them also have presentation modules built into them So with financial planning software, you can even on the fly, you know, create and update a plan on the fly when they're in a meeting room with you or on a Zoom call. But you need to get comfortable with the software first. And then adding visualization on top of that as a communication tool, you know, that just completes the package.
And I'll just add one more point to that. You know, where you hear a lot of talk in the marketplace, you see a lot of writing in the marketplace about the need to personalize, right? And the need for hyper personalization moving forward. This is even more acute with next generation investors. Next generation investors do not like a generic email. They're not going to take to that. I have 3 girls in their 20s. Trust me, they're just not going to take to it. And I don't think they're a microcosm. I think they're a representative of the marketplace. So you've got to think about how to simplify your communications so that you can make them more personalized. The more complex your communications are, the longer it's going to take you to personalize those communications, and the more difficult it is going to be for you to scale your business. So even if you just put your business ownership hat on for a moment, you've got to continue to hyper personalize to your clients because that's what they're demanding. You've got to find a way to do that at scale, and that's simply not complicated. You cannot have complication at scale. No one would ever say, I drive complication at scale, right? They drive simplicity at scale. So that's what you've got to look towards. So as Joel mentioned, look at your technology stack. I will actually say, look at your business processes. How often are you connecting with your client base? If you're only connecting with that client base on an annualized basis, you've got work to do before you start looking at your tech stack, right? Which is, how do I do this more often? And why am I only doing this once a year or once every half a year? How do I make that much more personalized and much more frequent?
And to piggyback off of that, John, is how do you systematize it so you control your life as a business owner? How do you systematize that so you can personalize communication and still take a vacation every now and then?
Yes, or at least have dinner with your family once in a while.
Yes.
All right, I think we have time for one more question here. So let's see. What if net investment gain is negative due to client withdrawals? The client may think the advisor is doing a good job, isn't doing a good job if they see that their account is down over a period of time. Wouldn't it be helpful to show performance rather than net gain loss?
I'm gonna weigh in, and then I'm gonna draw your attention back to Janet's example from earlier about the client that did do the large withdrawal. But I'm going to draw your attention back. No, do not focus on investment performance, because the client doesn't care necessarily about the investment performance. What they care about is, hey, this is where my portfolio is today. Can I retire with dignity? Here's where my portfolio is today. I have weddings coming up. Can I afford these weddings? The question is not, my investment did better. That's the advisor actually not listening to the client, in my opinion. Because the client doesn't care about how their investment did. If I had $20 yesterday and I got a 20% return, and I got $12 today, I still got $12. It doesn't matter. I can't afford, mics. So
it's a cash. What John is saying is it's a cash flow issue, right? So
right.
I don't want to say performance doesn't matter at all. There's expectations that you put people in a portfolio that, first of all, is appropriate for them with regard to risk and return. But what clients tend to forget or misunderstand is, even if we're doing really well for them, if they're overspending, the cash, their balance is going to go down and their cash flow is going to be negative. And so you need to be able to visualize all of these things and have that conversation. It's like, here's the performance, here's how much money you took out. That's why you have less money today than when you started. And if you can't illustrate both in a way that they're going to understand, you lose.
Yep.
And I can't control performance. I can't control the market. So yes, to Joel's point, I make sure it's invested appropriately. I make sure that the amount of return is appropriate with the amount of risk. I don't want to focus on that for the entire meeting because I can't control that. I can control the outcomes that I can, but that I can adjust the investments, I can adjust the risk, but I can't control what the market does. So we can have that deeper conversation there for those clients who want it, but most clients just want to know, to John's point, am I on track to do what I'm trying to do? And then also in that spending, I actually had another client who it's an older woman and her son is very involved and she spends too much. We know she spends too much. We had the conversation. She calls me up, or actually it was her son who called me up and said, hey, Janet, I want to sit down and I want to know from which account mom has spent how much. Now, there's multiple accounts. It would have taken me some time to go through which account. Yeah, no, I just pulled up the visualization, called Ted, said, hey, add another line there so we can have that visualization of how much money came out. And so in the meeting, it wasn't let's beat up on mom because she spent too much, because we know this is an issue. It was, okay, this much has been spent. Now, what are we going to do about it? So it changed the dynamic of the entire conversation because we got bottom line up front super quick. Now we can move on and say, okay, we can't continue this and live the same lifestyle. What are we going to do?
I once had a client who was a podiatrist. I'll never forget him. And, you know, the returns were really good, but he was spending it faster. And he called me up. He said, we need to have a meeting. And I said, okay, let's have a meeting. He's like, I need to spend more, so you need to make me more money. And I tried to explain to him that's not exactly the way things work. And eventually I ended up firing him as a client because I said, this is a lawsuit waiting to happen. He's pushing me to take more risk than his risk assessment says he can take. And, you know, no matter what happens, this is going to end badly. So I just referred him to some other advisors in the neighborhood that I didn't care for particularly.
I'm watching you, Joel. Okay. I know if I get a referral from Joel, I'll kick him to someone else.
Well, we're coming up against time. Colin, is there anything else burning? Otherwise, I think we'll bring it on home.
I have one last question here. I think we could wrap up with this one in the 3 minutes we have left. How are advisors integrating this into their practice?
I guess that one's for me, huh? So, okay, well, going back to that systemization of reaching out to our clients, we have a workflow where we, depending on meeting the clients where they are at, not everybody wants to hear from us. But if we want to reach out to them proactively, that semi-annual meeting, and they don't necessarily want to do a semi-annual meeting, I'll send them a video. So it's just saved me time. The client got the information they need. They know that, hey, we're thinking of you, we're watching it. And if something is top of mind, they'll reach back out. But a lot of our clients don't. I mean, we've been talking often about how clients don't necessarily want to sit down with their advisor all the time, but they want to know that we are on top of the changes in the market, what's going on with their account. So this is an easy thing to throw into our workflow, increase that client engagement, remember that we're top of mind, remind them that, hey, we're watching it and you can trust us. And if you got questions, we're here. Give us a holler.
Okay, well, with that, Janet, we'll let you have the final word. And everyone, thank you so much. I've learned a lot to think about. For our listeners and our audience today, do know that the recording will be sent to you. And look at the Oasis Group's website for more resources, including the AI Tech Map and much, much more. And stay tuned for the rest of this webinar series. I continue to be really intrigued by the conversations. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Marie.
Thanks.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Joe.